Welcome back to GCCKids Connection, where we are connecting with each other while you're home from school, we're connecting with some really cool books, and most importantly, we're connecting with God's Word. We're so glad you're here.
Welcome back, kids. Hey, I wonder if Fuzzle's going to be able to move into his log home anytime soon. Well, let's find out as we begin with chapter 15 in our book called New Kid in Town. The next night when I arose, I decided to go check on my old home even before I went to the pond. I was so anxious to get back into my own home again. As I traveled down the path toward the area where my log lay by the creek bank, I met two of the rabbit family. They decided to join me and headed for the log together. The squirrels heard us coming, and even though it was late in the day for them to be about, they went along too. Even two of the younger coons joined the party, and soon a possum joined us as well. The chatter was nonstop the whole way. I stated as soon as it was possible I would clean out my log and put dry materials in so I could move back in again. My constant talking did not stop my neighbors from talking as well, and we made quite a racket as we traveled down the woodland path together. A jay came out and scolded us soundly. She said that she had just settled her young down, and our noisy exchange had wakened them back up again. I mumbled an apology, but the jay was too busy scolding to even hear me. We did attempt to go more quietly after that. Even the squirrels quieted down some. By the time we reached the site of my log home, I was so excited I could hardly contain myself. I could see that the water had receded, and I hoped with all my heart that the log would be ready for me to put dry materials back inside again. I ran forward eagerly and then stopped short. For a minute, I was confused. My log was not where I expected it to be. I must have become a little mixed up, so I looked about me trying to get my bearings and decided that should I move to the left or to the right. All of my animal friends stood too, straining their eyes and looking for it. "That's funny," I finally said. "I thought that—" "It's not here," cut in Skidder. "It's gone." "What do you mean it's gone? It's got to be around here somewhere," I said lamely, stretching my neck, looking all around to see if I could find it. "What are you looking for?" asked a kind voice above our heads. "Maybe I can help you." We all looked up and saw a very large owl on the limb of the tree above us. "Fuzzle's log," spoke Skidder. "He had to leave it when the creek flooded, and now it doesn't seem to be here." "No," agreed the owl. "I'm afraid it isn't." "Can you tell us where to find it then? Should I go this way or that way?" I hurried on. "Oh my, no," said the owl. "It isn't this way or that way. It's gone." "Gone?" many voices echoed together. "Gone where?" I asked weakly. "Why, it's gone the way it came," said Mr. Owl. "The way it came?" "Yes, in the water." I was very puzzled and began to wonder if the owl really knew anything about this situation. "I don't think I understand." "The log wasn't always on this creek bank. It was not born and raised here," said the owl. No one questioned him. "No, indeed," he went on. "It came the way it left, with a flood." "With a flood?" I didn't want to believe it, but I thought that maybe I was beginning to understand after all. "Yes, with a flood. Who knows where the log really came from? It was not here, and then, after a heavy rain and a flood, there it was. It lay there for many rains and many snows, and now, with this flood, it's moved again." "Well, where will I find it?" I asked him, but even as I asked, I was afraid that the owl might not have the answer. "You will not find it," he said with confidence. "It is now gone. Not even I know how far it is." "But What will I do for a home? As soon as I asked the question, the animal friends who had been standing silently around me talking to the owl burst forth with questions of their own, and the noise was terrible. No one could hear or understand what anybody else was asking, nor if anyone was giving any good answers. It was some time until the owl was able to restore order again, and when he did, he just simply said, "You will need to find a new home." What? Again, we were asking all sorts of questions. "Hush, hush," he said. "All of you. Why, I'm surprised at this fuss. You all know that there are many homes in the forest. The loss of one is no big problem. It happens all the time. We just move on and find a new home and fix it up to meet our needs. You, Skidder, have you always lived in the same home?" "Well, no," said Skidder. "And you, Ringo?" he asked one of the coons. "Have you?" "No, but—" "And you, Mrs. Fluff?" he asked one of the rabbits. She shook her head. "You see," went on the owl, "there are homes aplenty in the forest. We just need to find one we like and fix it up to suit ourselves." I still didn't like it. I loved my log home, and I think that the other animals felt the same. "But I started. "There's no need to fuss about it," said the owl. "One just needs to get busy about it." There was a silence for a moment, and then Skidder said, "We'll help!" And a whole chorus of "We'll helps" broke forth. I appreciated their kindness. "Thank you," I cried above the din. "Thank you, I appreciate it, I really do. But Skidder, it's already past your bedtime. And the rest of you, it's time for breakfast. I think that we should all go about our usual ways and keep our eye open for something that's suitable. When we meet back at the pond just before sunup, we'll see if anybody's found anything. If not, I'll just go sleep in my temporary home again, and we'll try again tomorrow night. If in the meantime Skidder sees anything during the day when the sun's up, he can let us know." "That's very good thinking," said the owl, and I felt quite grown up and smart. After much calling and talking and chattering, we made noisy departures and promised to meet up at the pond just before daylight. I walked toward the picnic area, and the raccoons joined me. Ringo made an effort to cheer me up. "With all of us looking," he said, "we'll have you a new home in no time. And I bet you'll like it even better than the old one." I hoped sincerely that he was right, but I have to admit I was a little dubious. It was getting on toward sunrise when I hurried to the pond to meet with my friends. I had watched carefully as I traveled through the forest that night, but I had found nothing that looked like a suitable home. I hoped that one of my friends might have seen something. When I approached the pond, I saw that many of them had already gathered. They were talking excitedly in babbles of voices, and I hurried forward, expecting each one of them to have 2 or 3 places to recommend. That was not the case. As I got nearer, the chattering subsided completely, and everybody seemed to be waiting for somebody else to begin talking. "Well," I said expectantly, "where do we start?" There was no answer. "Didn't anyone find anything suitable?" I asked slowly. They only shook their heads. Nor did I. I shook my head also, and I must have sounded very sad, but still no one spoke. I turned to go down the path when a deep voice above me said almost reproachfully, "Why so glum? There's plenty of time. You have only searched for one night. There are plenty of homes about. The proper one will be found at the proper time." It was the owl. I picked up my droopy tail and gave it a little fluff. Of course he was right. I turned back to my friends. "Well, I'll keep looking. There are plenty of good homes here in the forest. We'll just have to find the right one in the right time." A general noise of chatter followed my statement. "And now," I continued, "we better all be off before the sun gets too high in the sky and the day folks think that we're going to take over the day as well as the night." The forest creatures laughed at my poor attempt at humor. Even though my joke had not been a very good one, the effect of the laughter was good for all of us, so we went off to bed in a much better mood. I did not sleep well in my temporary shelter. It was not at all to my liking. I kept thinking about not finding anything better and having to spend the rest of my life in this place. Well, I finally decided if I did, I did. I would just make an effort to fix it up and make it comfortable. I wasn't happy with that thought, but it was an improvement over fretting over something that I could do nothing about. That evening, I crawled from my hard bed and set out for the pond. The first order of the night business would be to care for my tummy. After my drink, I was ready to head for the picnic barrels. The picnic site was always a buzz of activity. People called to me and asked if I had heard anything yet, and I answered that I hadn't, but I was sure that something would come up soon. The barrels were not yielding as many good things as they had earlier in the summer, and most of us left the area still hungry and had to move on to find other things. I met Flossie and Mittens, and they told me that I was welcome to come with them to Mrs. Peters' garden patch. Mrs. Peters was always in bed by the time they arrived, being a day creature rather than a night creature. They also cautioned that she has a dog, and he didn't seem to have too much preference for day or night and would set up barking any time he was disturbed. They were confident, though, that we could raid the garden without sending off the alarm. Sounded good to me, and I was hungry. I remembered how the round sides of the rabbits looked after they visited the garden, so I thanked them for their invitation, and I fell in behind them. It was a bit of a walk to the Peterses. I was sure that the rabbits would have been able to cover the ground much faster had they not been keeping pace with me. I wondered if they were annoyed at my slowness, but they said nothing to indicate that they were. Rabbits, I decided, are very polite people. When we did arrive at last at the Peters, I found it just as the rabbits had said. The fenced-in garden was full of tasty things to eat. Some of the food had already been harvested by the humans, but there was still plenty left behind. I nosed about, trying a bit of this and a taste of that. Most of it was delicious, though I did find one or two things that I decided I would leave for the rabbits. They were not to my liking. We ate our fill and each grabbed another mouthful as we left the patch. This we chewed as we waddled down the path toward the woods. We were greedy and full and I just wanted to crawl in somewhere and go to sleep. Even the rabbits were not anxious to travel fast, as their sides were bulging as much as mine were. I thought that we would never reach the pond, but eventually we did. Our neighbors were waiting for us, a bit impatiently, I'm afraid. It was then that I realized that in my preoccupation of eating all I could hold, I had not even thought about watching for a future home. I blushed as the thought passed through my head. How could I expect my friends to remember if even I had forgotten? The reports on this night were not very encouraging. A few had suggested something that they had spotted, but always there was someone else who had also seen the potential home and declared it not suitable at all. We were about ready to leave when Skidder came bounding in. "Hey!" he called. "Did you find anything?" We all answered in unison that nothing had been found. Skidder skidded to the halt. He panted and was from his running. I saw this fallen tree," he said. It might work just fine," and he began to describe it to me. He hadn't gone far when I realized that he was actually describing where I was presently staying. I smiled at him. "Yeah, I know," I said. "In fact, that's where I'm living right now." Skidder looked a little embarrassed and I didn't want him to, so I hurried on. "And if I don't find anything else that will work just fine, I'll just fix up the bed and seal off the north a bit, and I didn't finish. I still didn't like the location. We all decided to go home to bed and try again the next night. We had just turned down the path when Cassandra and Mrs. Deer approached. They were both very shy and rarely sought out other animals for visiting, though they were most polite. When they came to join us now, I tingled with excitement. "We hear you're looking for a home, Fuzzle," said Mrs. Deer. That's right, I answered very softly. No one spoke very loudly to the deer. Cassandra thinks she might have found something. You tell him, dear. And she gently nudged Cassandra forward. Excitement filled Cassandra's voice. Well, it's over near our meadow, she said. It's a log, much like what you had before, only a little bit bigger, I think. It's dry and in a place where it will never be reached by floodwaters. It's almost hidden, so it's very private. Privacy was very important to the deer family. It's close to the meadow and not too far from the pond or the picnic area, she continued. I felt like I was about ready to burst. Can I see it? I asked, almost forgetting to be polite. Could you show us? Of course, she answered and turned to lead the way. We all followed her. The other animals of the forest just seemed to be as excited as I was at the possibility of a new home. We tried to be gentle and mannerly as we hurried after the deer, but there was so much chattering and skipping, I'm afraid. Then we reached the site. Cassandra had to take us right up to the log. It was so hidden. I don't think I would have spotted it on my own, and I wondered how she had found it. The entrance, though partly concealed, was wide and allowed plenty of room for passage. Even I, with my bulging sides, could fit through with no difficulty. Inside, it was perfect. Way toward the back was a perfect sleeping room. It was soft with the dust of the rotting log, and with a little moss and some dry leaves, it would be very cozy and warm. I ached to just curl up right then and there and claim it as my home. Jiminy whiz, I said, grinning as I looked around. I went back out to tell Cassandra that it was just what I was looking for. As soon as I came out, my friends took turns going in to check it out. They were as excited as I was, and each of them in turn told me it was quite the nicest skunk home they had ever been in. I thanked Cassandra the best I could. I knew that I would never be able to really tell her how much I appreciated the home she had found for me. She hung her head shyly, but she gave me a delightful smile. The chattering around me made me aware of my friends. How do you want it fixed? What do you need? Let's see what we can find. What can we bring? Everyone was all talking at once, and I knew that they wouldn't be happy until I was properly settled in. So I tried to force my sleepy eyes to stay open for just a bit longer so I could respond to my friends. Well, I used moss and leaves, I answered them, and animals scurried off in all directions. Skidder was soon back with a mouthful of dry moss. You go in and we'll bring the materials to you, and then you can arrange them the way you want, he told me. I went in and put Skidder's moss just where I wanted it, and poked it and arranged it just the way I wanted it to go. I poked some more and tucked in some more about my feet, and then I pushed a bit more around the head and patted my bed a bit. It looked so inviting that I could hardly keep myself from crawling into it. I went out to hold the supply line of materials and to inform my friends that I had all of the materials I could use. The birds had gathered around my door. Even the jays had joined them, and instead of scolding as they usually did, the jay was the spokesman. The softness of a bed is in the feathers, said Mrs. Jay, presenting a feather in her beak. I hardly knew what to say. I'd never slept on a feather bed before. If you'll just come out, said Mrs. Finch in a quiet voice, we'll go in and arrange things. I stepped out, and one by one, the birds took their turn going in with a feather held in their mouth and returning in a flash with nothing but a contented smile. I knew that they were proud that they were able to make me a proper bed. Now there, said Mrs. Sparrow, the last one to deposit her feather, and I knew that she was satisfied that my bed was ready for occupancy. Thank you all for the moss and the leaves and the feathers. And thank you, Cassandra, for the home. I'm sure I will be very happy here. I can hardly wait to try it out. That was for sure. The sun was shining down on the earth now, warming us all and making us night creatures even drowsier. I knew that my friends were all tired, and I appreciated the fact that they had stayed up extra late to help me get moved in. And now I said, I'm going to go test it out. They left by twos and threes, hurrying down the various paths toward their own homes, and I crawled into my new home and went to my new bed. The softness of it was like being on a cloud. I wondered why we skunks had never thought about sleeping on feathers before. It was absolutely delightful. I curled up so tightly as my still fat tummy would allow me to, and my body just sank deeply into the softness of my bed, and I went to sleep. And such a sleep I had. I had never been more comfortable and slept more soundly. I promised myself that I would be sure and tell all of my woodland friends that I had never slept in a more comfortable and delightful bed as the one I now had. Wow. Fuzzle didn't find his old log, but he found a home that was even better. How cool is that? Well, for our activity sheet today, we have some more thinking questions like, how did the woodland creatures show that they were good friends to Fuzzle? And then it says the birds made Fuzzle's new home into a feather bed. People used to sleep in feather beds. Find out what a feather bed was like. And then under advice for Fuzzle, it says Fuzzle was worried about not being able to find a new comfortable home. So read Matthew 6 verses 25 to 33 and then tell Fuzzle what those verses have to say about worrying. And then down at the bottom in our sciencey questions, it says the owls seem to have a lot of wisdom. Find out where the old saying comes from, wise old owl. Why do people think owls are wise, and are they really wise? Something interesting to find out. Well, thanks for being with us today, and come back next time to find out what else is going to happen to Fuzzle and his friends. See you next time.